Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Robert's Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. All right, as we did the champion profile for Cale Yarborough, we closed out the 70s of different champions. So now we are doing the best of the decade of the 70s. During that era, we had four different champions. We had Bobby Isaac, the 1970 champion. We had Richard Petty. He won 71 and 72. Again in 74 and 75. And then again in 79, 73 champion was Benny Parsons, 76, 77, and 78 for Cale Yarborough. So during the decade of the 70s, we noticed a decline in the number of races because when Winston came in, we basically created what's called the modern era in 1970. We got rid of any track that was less than a half mile. We got rid of any race that was less than 300 miles. We wanted to kind of concentrate on the 400 and 500 mile races at the bigger tracks. So when Winston came in 72 and started sponsoring, made it the Winston Cup Series, went from NASCAR Grand National to Winston Cup. As the 70s went on, once we did this move, we needed a second tier series. So that's when the late model sportsman division started, and then what we know of today as the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And in the 80s, it changed to the Grand National division, Busch Grand National, and then now NASCAR Xfinity, and other names during at that time as well. So in the 70s, 336 starts total, 498 different drivers started a cup race, 23 different winners. We had 33 drivers racing 100 races or more, 15 and 200 or more, and 7 drivers with 300 or more starts. Another thing it did for us, by shortening the season, now drivers were racing all the races versus back in the 60s, you might have a 55 race season, but the drivers would race like 50 races of them. But now with sponsors becoming more involved in the sport, you had everyone driving all the races. We had 8 drivers with 10 or more wins, 5 drivers with 20 or more wins, and 4 drivers with 40 or more wins. The first race of the 70s was January 18, 1970 at Riverside, the Motor Trend 500, won by A.J. Foyt. And by this era of the 70s, almost every race had a title sponsor. Like the last race, November 18, 1979, Ontario Motor Speedway, the Los Angeles Times 500, won by Benny Parsons. During this decade, Richard Petty, Frank Warren, both had the most races ran, 326. Cecil Gordon, 323. James Hilton and Benny Parsons, both 320. Bobby Allison, 313. J.D. McDuffie, 310. Dave Marcus, 289. The most wins during that decade, the King, Richard Petty, 89. Cale Yarborough, 52. David Pearson, 47. Bobby Allison, 40. Darrell Waltrip, 22. Bobby Isaac, 16. Betty Baker and Benny Parsons, each with 14. Now, the drivers that had the most starts but no wins, Frank Warren, 326. Cecil Gordon, 323. J.D. McDuffie, 310. Ed Negray, 355. Richard Childress, 232. Buddy Arrington, 221. Elmo Langley, 221. And Jabe Thomas, 180. The best winning percentage of their NASCAR starts for the 1970s, Richard Petty, 27.3% of his starts. David Pearson, 25.2%. Cale Yarborough, 22.2%. Bobby Allison, 13.1%. Bobby Isaac, 11.6%. Darrell Waltrip, 11.6%. Best average finish of the decade, Richard Petty averaged a 7.35 finish for the entire decade of 326 races. Cale Yarborough, 8.85. Bobby Allison, 10.2. David Pearson, 10.9. Benny Parsons, 12.3. Darrell Waltrip, 12.7. James Hilton, 12.9. And Buddy Baker, 13.2. So that is the stats from the 1970s. As we get on into the 80s and 90s and 2000s, we'll see the number of races. It went down in the 70s, but it started going back up. We started having more races. We got up to 36. We've had it for a number of years now. We were low at 29 at one point. As new tracks were being built and new areas wanted these cup races, we had such a boom in the 80s and 90s, and we're seeing a little decline in that now because of property value. A lot of speedways are going away because they take up so much land the developers are seeing this going, we'll give you X amount of millions of dollars for this land so we can build houses and stuff and build this, that, and the other and sell it for millions of dollars. And some of these races, like, we can't make that kind of money in 20 years, so why not, you know? So there are, unfortunately, tracks that are going away. You know, Texas World Speedway is one of the later ones. If you watch Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s Lost Speedways, they're on Peacock. It talks about some of the speedways where that has happened to, and we've seen it with Riverside and some other places. But all right, that's going to wrap up NASCAR Cup Series by the decade, the 1970s. As always, thanks for watching the Robert Sports Show. Don't just have a great day. Have a spiffy day. Robert Sports Show, your YouTube leader in sports channel content.